Good morning. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning to take part in this really important discussion about whistleblower protection in South Africa. My name is Tracy Davies. I'm the Executive Director of Just Share, a non-profit shareholder activism organization, and we researched and wrote the report Whistleblower Protection in South Africa, Where to From Here, with the support of Old Mutual Investment Group and Futuregrowth Asset Management. I'm joined today by the CIO of Futuregrowth, Mr. Andrew Cantor, the Head of Responsible Investment for Old Mutual Investment Group, Rob Lewenson, and the Executive Director of the very excitingly newly launched Whistleblower House, Mr. Ben Turon. Welcome, everyone, and I'm looking forward to our discussion this morning. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. The webinar is scheduled, as you will know, to go for an hour. We know everyone's very busy, and so we appreciate your time. However, we will the four of us will stay on for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour afterwards, should anyone wish to continue the conversation with us. You'll see in the bottom of the screen, there is a questions button and a chat button. If you want to interact with the audience or make general comments, please use the chat. For questions, please use the questions box, which is what we'll refer to when we get to the Q&A session at the end. There's also a useful function there where you can upvote a question if you agree with it, so we can get a sense of the questions that the audience most wants us to answer. Right, so how did we get here? When Futuregrowth and Old Mutual approached Just Share to research and write this report, we were really having a discussion about the legal framework. None of us knew much about it. We thought we needed to figure out what is the whistleblower protection regime like in South Africa. Most of us assumed, given the stories that we were hearing about whistleblowers, that there wasn't really much of one. And at the start of it, we really thought that the research and the report would probably need to focus on legal reform. But in the course of the research, we discovered that this is not the case at all. South Africa actually has a pretty extensive legal framework for whistleblower protection. And on paper, it doesn't look that much worse than most of the whistleblower protection regimes around the world. However, as we dug deeper, we started to realize the extent of the gaps and flaws in the legislation, and also that in reality, it just wasn't working. And I think if you speak to any whistleblower in this country, you'll hear them use the phrase, the Protected Disclosures Act is not worth the paper it is written on. So the Protected Disclosures Act is the primary source of legislation designed to provide for the protection of whistleblowers in South Africa. And we started out looking at the ins and outs of that, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But most importantly, I just wanted to start by saying that we thought this would be a fairly kind of dry legal exercise. And in actual fact, this research and the work we did on this report shocked us, shocked all of us, continues to shock all of us. The number of high-profile whistleblowers in this country and untold numbers of not so high-profile whistleblowers have really suffered the most extraordinary, devastating personal consequences after exposing fraud and corruption and wrongdoing in both the public and the private sector. Ironically, even though I don't think many people would disagree that it was largely due to the bravery of whistleblowers that the Zuma regime came to an end, these people don't seem to be particularly highly regarded in our society in terms of how they are treated. And so we have set out, inadvertently in a way, I think, to really try to share with South Africa what the obstacles are that are being faced by whistleblowers and what we can do about it. As I said, the Protected Disclosures Act is the key piece of legislation, and the Constitutional Court has described the necessity of the PDA, is how I will refer to it from now on, because it's a very awkward name, in affirming our democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. Laid above the legislation itself are a number of institutions which are mandated to play a role in ensuring that people who speak out about wrongdoing are protected. These include the Public Service Commission, the Human Rights Commission, the Auditor General, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the Public Protector. There are actually in total around 12 pieces of legislation in South Africa that deal with whistleblowing. One of our key criticisms of the regime, and many people's criticisms, is that there is very little connection and sort of rationality between those different pieces of legislation. But in the real world, what's happening in the real world? Whistleblower experience has demonstrated that the more important the disclosures a whistleblower is making, the more devastating are the consequences that they face. For many whistleblowers, their jobs are only the first thing that they lose. They lose their pensions when they lose their jobs. They lose their homes when banks foreclose on them, or they have to sell their homes to finance the legal defense that they need when there are spurious civil and criminal legal actions laid against them by their employers. These are fees that can run into the millions of rands. Many are harassed, bullied, intimidated, ostracized. They and their families are threatened. They suffer immense anxiety, depression, and fear. And in the recent tragic case of Gauteng Provincial Department of Health employee Babita Diakaran, sometimes they are even murdered for speaking out. Almost without exception, this retaliation against whistleblowers in South Africa goes unpunished. I'm going to say that again. Almost without exception, this retaliation against whistleblowers in South Africa goes unpunished. The South African legal framework for whistleblower protection protects a whistleblower to some extent if they have suffered an occupational detriment. In other words, something bad that happens to you at work. You're suspended, you lose your job, you have a disciplinary hearing, you're harassed. But it does not deal at all with all of the issues that happen beyond the workplace. The remedies that the PDA provides for whistleblowers are limited to labor law remedies. In other words, a whistleblower can only be compensated for a limited amount of loss of income. 12, or if they're very lucky, 24 months of compensation is the maximum payout for a whistleblower in terms of our labor law remedies. And let's not for a second pretend that it's easy even to get to the point of being awarded that payout. So the PDA doesn't prevent the institution of criminal or civil proceedings against a person for making a protected disclosure. It doesn't provide for any penalties or consequences for retaliation measures against a whistleblower. Mosilo Mapetu, who was the former CEO of Trillion Financial Advisory and a very well-known whistleblower in South Africa, had criminal and civil charges laid against her by her former employer, which also pursued her in the Labour Court and the CCMA. The Hawks and the National Prosecuting Authority, two of the institutions mandated, in fact, to protect whistleblowers, investigated Mapetu for over a year. When they decided that there was no evidence on which to proceed with their investigation, they didn't even bother to notify her. At present, the PDA does not provide any proactive protection in such circumstances, even though this is a very straightforward thing to legislate. A couple of other things that are real problems with the PDA. It doesn't provide for protected disclosures to be made anonymously. It doesn't require those to whom a protected disclosure is made to keep the identity of the whistleblower confidential. And it doesn't provide for any protection when that identity is leaked. The Zondo Commission, the reports recently released by the Zondo Commission, has identified this as a key failing of the South African legal system for whistleblowers. Crucially, the burden of proof is not specifically regulated in the PDA, as a result of which whistleblowers have it on, the onus is on them to prove not only that the disclosure that they made was protected, but also that they've suffered an occupational detriment as a result. There's also no provision for any kind of reward or incentive for whistleblowing in South Africa. And it's extraordinary the number of people we came across in our research who thought that the very idea of a reward for whistleblowing shouldn't even be on the table. There seems to be some kind of perception that a whistleblower who blows the whistle for a reward lacks credibility. This view really isn't backed up by experiences in the rest of the world. In the USA, for example, where there are significant financial rewards for whistleblowing that leads to recuperation of lost funds or criminal activity. And at this point, given the devastation that whistleblowers are facing in this country, it seems impossible to achieve better protection without some kind of financial reward or incentive, even if it's just financial support. The PDA requires all employers to put in place internal mechanisms for receiving and investigating protected disclosures, but there's no monitoring or enforcement of this, no penalties if you don't do it. Then in addition to the PDA, we have a number of national bodies and institutes and initiatives all of whom are mandated to deal with whistleblowing. And it is extraordinary. I mean, we set this out in huge detail in the report, and I certainly can't go through it here. The number of initiatives and bodies and government frameworks and task teams and task forces and recommendations there've been over the years for whistleblower protection. As far as we can tell, none of them have had any impact whatsoever. We have, believe it or not, in this country, a national anti-corruption hotline, which has been going for about 20 years. Last year, so the National Anti-Corruption Hotline is managed by the Public Service Commission. Last year, the Director General of the Public Service Commission was fired for appointing the mother of his child to the position of Chief Director for Professional Ethics and paying her for a number of months of work, which she did not do. This is the Chapter 10 institution designed or set up to protect ethics in public service. There is a national anti-corruption strategy which deals comprehensively with whistleblowing. This was the result of the Anti-Corruption Interministerial Committee task team, which was established in 2014. And this national anti-corruption strategy, 6, 7, 8 years later, was launched last year. We haven't seen any evidence of impact as a result. If anyone in the audience can share differently with us, that would be super helpful. So, in summary, we have a big problem here, and the state is not fulfilling its role to protect whistleblowers. Whistleblowing and the protection of whistleblowers and the respect that we accord people who are brave enough to speak up about wrongdoing in our society is a cornerstone of democracy. And I think we can all imagine where we would be right now, even if we think things are not so great now, where we would be right now without the whistleblowers that spoke up about state capture. Many of the people that we interviewed and engaged with when we were doing this report were very, very clear that we should not give up on the state. And we fully agree with that. The state has a crucial role to play. Legislation has a crucial role to play. And the Zondo Commission, I think, has made it extremely clear that the state needs to really step up in this regard. However, at the moment, the incentives are completely perverse. There is virtually nothing to prevent or deter the subject of a whistleblower's disclosure from going all out to silence that whistleblower with no thought of any consequences. And there is no incentive for whistleblowers to come forward. And that's the incentive system that we are wanting to talk about and address today. And we think that that is where the private sector can play a role. One of our key recommendations of the report in terms of the role of the private sector is that there is potential for some kind of fund or foundation to be capitalized by the private sector with money that can be used in a very accountable way to provide financial and legal and psychological support to whistleblowers. There is a myriad number of ways in which whistleblowers need support, and Ben will speak to us a bit more about that a bit later. But this is not prescriptive. The idea of this report was to start a conversation. Futuregrowth and Old Mutual are starting that conversation, and we're going to hear more about how they think the private sector should play a role in a little while. So that is the broad overview. The report is, it's not, yeah, Andrew, go for it.
So I love that intro, and that sounds like that's a good summary of all the problems. I think you missed one key one I'd like to highlight. And to our reading, as we got your research and you look at the sweep of legislation, regulation, where whistleblowers mentioned, as you just said, most of it's all vague and non-specific and weak. But the point is, as a whistleblower contemplating blowing the whistle, man, you go into completely blind. Unless you have it's a legal issue. You are becoming part of the judicial system when you blow the whistle. And without legal advice in advance, for free, you're already in trouble. You're going to walk right into the lion's den and get eaten. And so I think that's the one key structural element that you didn't mention that I wanted to highlight. And then beyond that, I would just entreat the audience, this is not a bitch session. We're not going to rehash all the bad news you've all been hearing for the past 5 years. We're trying to move towards what we can do in solutions. So please stick around.
Thanks, Andrew. And yes, absolutely. That's one of that terror and what you're confronted with when you're considering blowing the whistle is certainly one of the key things we want to talk about. So I'm going to ask each of you, please, just to spend no more than 5 minutes, and I'm going to stop you if you go beyond that, talking about why you think this issue is important from your perspective, where you sit in the South African ecosystem or financial sector. And just to give the audience a bit of a sense, Rob and Andrew, about your perception of this from a responsible investment point of view, and Ben, why you've set up Whistleblower House in a nutshell. We'll obviously hear about that in more detail in a little while. But Ben, let's start with you.
It's very difficult to speak after what you just introduced there, because you've captured everything absolutely beautiful. But let me try to just summarize it in 4 sentences, the way Zondo Commission, who is now the Chief Justice, has summarized it. He said the following: the present system offers no inducement to the whistleblower to break cover. Number 1. Number 2, as a matter of urgency, effective protection from retaliation should be put in place. Number 3, it does not provide a clear-cut procedure for whistleblower to follow, and that's what Andrew just mentioned now, and is not proactive in providing physical protection to whistleblowers. So that's the reason why whistleblower was set up, because it's a quagmire. You walk in danger, you are exposed, and you just captured everything in your introduction. But we'll get to the detail a bit later. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Rob.
Apologies. Good morning, everyone. Well, just to echo your sentiments in many respects, Tracy, but I shudder to think where the listed market, particularly listed entities, as well as state-owned entities that at issue listed debt, which we in turn subscribe for, where they would be without the bravery that has taken place over the past few years. I will put that up front. Question that is, okay, so now what? We have really got to move forward with a concrete plan. I think it is going to require a joint effort. It's not enough to leave to the state alone. The private sector has to be involved in its various guises with various regulatory authorities, as well as its listed and unlisted companies and NGOs and other academic institutions will all play a key role here. So I would say that, to echo the sentiment, we are using this particularly this webinar to bring into the discussion those who have been sitting on the sidelines, really not necessarily involved, but also of receiving the consequences of those that have chosen to blow the whistle. In many respects, the functioning, and we can go into efficient market theory and everything else, but Andrew and others will agree that information is crucial. It's valuable, and good information that is issued into the market timelessly that benefits everyone is crucial to the well functioning of our financial system. So, from my point of view, what whistleblowers are doing for society, where they have nefarious or non-nefarious means or whatever, or context, or whatever the case may be, ultimately the product and outcome is to the benefit of all, certainly all our clients, and to the listed market as a whole. I'll leave it there, Tracy, if there's any further questions, and I'll come to some of the detail later in terms of what we have done in the past as a responsible investor, as an active steward, to change at least what we can change within the listed equity space. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Over to you, Andrew.
So I agree. As with Rob, we'll get into the weeds of what we can do as an investor later on. But at the highest level, one of the problems here, in addition to everything you mentioned, Tracy, is that the scope of whistleblowing is everything. It could be a simple petty theft thing internally, where the reporting line is suitably to the boss, to the CFO, the CEO. And then there's a larger scale malfeasance that if you report to the CFO, that's a problem because he's the malfeasant guy. You've got to jump to the audit committee, which must have an independent chair. They jump to the board or jump to a regulator. So there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of complexity about whistleblowing. It's private sector, it's public sector. It's call out any wrongdoing. Who you do it to and how you do it requires a huge amount of judgment. So I think it's important for particularly for us anyway, to narrow our scope. And frankly, that's enough. If we are responsible investors, as Rob hinted, and we only focus on principally ethical and financial malfeasance in companies that are accessing public sector capital or public capital, pension funds, unit trust, we will be covering the great wide scope of the economy, including state-owned enterprises, by the way. So I think if we take our role there and let others take their role in dealing with whistleblowers, that's probably a pretty good approach. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there for the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's an important point to make more broadly, because I think sometimes when someone comes along with a new issue like this and, expresses interest in it and wants to do something, there's a huge amount of expectation. This is a vast area with huge ramifications and potential and different elements and aspects, as Andrew said. So we are going to try and keep the content of the discussion today to the role that the private sector can play in some element of that, not in solving the problem. Okay, so Rob, you were speaking about
Tracy. I wanted to mention the anonymity thing that you mentioned, but it's so important. We talk about what's happened, the terrible things that have happened to the people that have put their head above the parapet and literally gotten shot, right? If we had anonymity, we wouldn't have to have police protection for whistleblowers. People should be anonymous. You should be able to literally throw information to an investigative body, whatever investigative body it is, and then step out of it and never hear from it again. They shouldn't even necessarily get back to you. You should be so anonymous they can't even find you to give you a report back, but you must know that somebody's taking it forward. By the way, there's many organizations do that. CFA Institute does that, by the way. If you report something about a CFA charter holder, they never get back to the person that reported the event. They say, we take it over from here. And that's great. You want to blow the whistle and go back and know that you've done the right thing without taking personal risk. And if we talk about the history of the last 10 years of South Africa and stopping state capture, an awful lot of that wasn't whistleblowers to regulatory. In fact, none of it probably was. It was all to the press. It was all the public disclosure that shone a spotlight on it and forced reaction. And by the way, the press has to be hailed as one of the great protectors of democracy and great protectors of whistleblowers, because they do not divulge their sources. Critical. And there's a good role model there we could use. Sorry, Tracy.
And it's an element of the law's kind of weaknesses that perhaps we need to highlight specifically, is that you have to make these protected disclosures to your employer. That is a provision of the Protected Disclosures Act. And we were alerted this week to the fact that the New Zealand has just passed a new whistleblowing law. And in fact, they've dispensed with that requirement. They've said it can still constitute a protected disclosure if you bypass the employer. It's kind of ludicrous if you think about it, as you say. Let me go and report the wrongdoing to the person who's doing the wrongdoing and hope that everything's fine afterwards. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, but just bringing it back to specifics, Rob, you were talking about Old Mutual's, the way Old Mutual manages this in terms of your responsible investment and stewardship approach. But also you could maybe just talk a little bit about I'm not sure everyone is going to be super clear on why the financial sector should actually care about this. What are the implications of poor whistleblowing protection for your clients and for the financial sector more broadly?
So let me bring it back to again, efficiency of the markets, because if we don't have that information, I seriously, I shudder to think what would transpire in the investment case. I mean, firstly, the credibility of our market. If there is, and I'll say this again, it comes down to sunlight is the best disinfectant. You get the true value to be unlocked, what's actually going on. People are maybe mispricing the assets of a company if those assets are being stolen and it's covered up. And there's many, many instances. I mean, we'll see it in recent times. I mean, we don't need to highlight the examples, but whistleblowing has played a key role in both the Steinhoff and in the Tongaat situations. Whistleblowers have come to the fore and have been part of the reason why that those factors didn't go on. I mean, we have seen also, and I think this is to the point about, well, where does the market lie, and how listed companies actually dealt with whistleblowing? Because it, again, to Andrew's point, there are so many layers in terms of which whistleblowers have to go through to get to someone who's going to be independent enough to make a judgment and do something about it. I know there are instances where there has been whistleblowing in listed companies which has not ever seen the light of day. And for me, that bothers me. So what we've did was an exercise where we looked at the whistleblower regime, and typically listed entities will say, oh, we've got a whistleblower hotline. Okay, great. But where does it go? Does the phone ring at the CFO's desk when that whistleblower hotline is dialed? Is it anonymous? Does it reach an independent party directly? And if so, how does that independent party directly respond to the board or the independent board, as it may be? That's in and of itself an issue in terms of that the line has been dialed, that there is an issue that has been raised, and how is it going to be dealt with? If we don't know how these things are, I can tell you for all of those that have been publicly disclosed or have come through in terms of late information, there are probably a lot more that haven't landed or haven't had the outcome that we wanted to see. And that strikes me as being very problematic. So from a listed entity point of view, there has to be guidance. There has to be, and there is actually guidance in terms of how to do whistleblowing properly and have the right independence oversight of the whistleblower hotline and other ways of blowing the whistle, other than necessarily meeting your requirements in terms of protected disclosure. And that for me is a practical way of ensuring, or it has been a practical way of at least ensuring that there's more of an even playing field than what we have seen, and certainly in the past.
Yeah, and on the topic of sunlight is the best disinfectant. I mean, I don't want people to be under any illusion that this is only a public sector problem, as you've highlighted. The Institute for Ethics at Gibbs does an annual survey where it asks thousands and thousands of employees of companies in South Africa whether they're aware of wrongdoing within their companies, and if so, whether they've reported it. And every year, there are lots of people who say they are aware of it, and most of them say they haven't reported it. And the main reason for that is either that they fear the consequences of reporting it, or that they say it doesn't really matter because nothing will change, nothing will happen, so I may as well protect my job. So what we are seeing is really probably just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's out there. And if we create a regime where blowing the whistle is somewhat more productive and less dangerous, we may see a whole lot more of these kinds of disclosures. We hope we would see a whole lot more of these disclosures that would improve governance in the public and the private sector. So, Andrew, we have spoken quite a lot in our many meetings on this topic recently and in the past about the so-called elephant in the room. I'm very disappointed to see that you have not included your fluffy elephant behind you as you had in our practice run yesterday. And that is, we've seen a lot of whistleblowers when they are interviewed on TV or, in the media about their experiences. We see a lot of anger, not just at the people who retaliated against them and the people who harassed them and hunted them down, but against the lack of support they're receiving from society more broadly, and the private sector in particular. We see a lot of whistleblowers saying it's absolutely amazing. We'll have corporate executives come out and praise what we did and say how wonderful it is that we were so brave. But when we try and get a job, no one will even consider hiring us because we're somehow considered to be tainted. Now, I find that bizarre. I would much rather have someone in my organization who's willing to speak up and speak out about wrongdoing. But this is apparently a pervasive problem, that these people just can't get employed again because they're viewed as somehow dangerous or risky or tainted. So there is a danger, and we've spoken about this a lot, that people will be sitting here saying, you guys, you're just talking about something to make yourselves look good. It's just another PR stunt. What are you actually going to do? What can and should the private sector actually do? So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that. And I know it's not something that anyone can have a solution to overnight, but also maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, since we've gone public with this report and since we've been talking about it in the media and since it's been launched, what's the response been from the financial sector? Has there been a response? Are you getting support? Are you getting indications of solidarity? You know, what's the landscape looking like out there in the financial sector? Oh, I think you're on mute, Andrew.
Sorry. It's an unanswerable question, and you know it is. The answer is those people must be supported. And you talked about forming a foundation or having some sort of a fund of support. So I don't have that answer. And you're right, there's innate unfairness, but in many ways, sadly, those people are hit by a bus and they are harmed for life. My current focus, my thinking is we can best serve those people by solving the problems that led them to get hit by the bus. So the next person who wants to blow the whistle doesn't get hit by a bus. I mean, you might think of it like the polio vaccine. Before there was a polio vaccine, the kids got polio and it's terrible and they permanently had it, but let's get the vaccine. So that's where I really want to shift the focus to. And I want to pick up where Rob was leaving off and frankly admit that this is a journey of discovery. We aren't trying to be a talk shop here. We are learning. The reason we commissioned research is because research drives understanding, and understanding drives outcomes. And that's exactly why we asked Just Share to do the work you did for us. Now, having taken that forward, and Rob said today, but we, in the last few weeks since you finished your report, we've gone out and created a whole bunch of other places where we have intervention points. So, for example, we have been through all of SICA and IRBA's guidance notes, hundreds of pages. The word whistleblower appears, I think, 6 times in hundreds of pages, and it gives no specific guidance to an auditor. Now, it seems self-evident to me that an auditor must be given guidance that if a whistleblower gives you information, A, you must investigate it, and B, you must maintain the confidentiality and the anonymity of whoever gave you that information. It's self-evident. It doesn't appear in either IRBA's or SICA's guidance at all, which means they're going to go run off to the CFO who pays their bills. Now, Rob, I think this goes to what we do as investors, being much more specific. Auditors of companies are appointed by the shareholders at an AGM. They are not appointed by management. They are not appointed by the board, specifically because their job is to keep an eye on the company and on the board on behalf of the investors. To the extent that we abdicate, and we have, let's be frank about investors abdicating responsibility, collectively, I mean, appointment of auditors and control of auditors' behaviors, and control of now auditors' whistleblowing policies and standards, then that's our problem. So what do we do about it? Going to your question, Tracy, what can we do about it? Well, let's just start looking at what auditors do and having industry standards, what auditors must do in dealing with whistleblowers. Easy intervention point. And that's one. Now, going further, we've also looked at a range of documents from the King Code to the Institute of Directors has policy papers, to the PRI on all these things. And by and large, they are very vague. The King Code talks about ethical culture. I mean, the King Code is a principles-based document. It doesn't get specific. So it's wonderful as far as it goes, but doesn't go very far. More interesting, and I was really, really surprised and really, really pleased to find this out. The Institute of Directors has a paper which is only 5 pages and actually lays out exactly what a whistleblower policy should do and how whistleblowers policies and practices should happen in practice. Details about reporting lines, about a chain of command, about how high up you report to whom and to how, maintaining anonymity, having clear protocols, policies, reporting on things, a case management system. It's 5 pages, and that list of questions is literally half a page long. And we are now implementing that in our counterparty assessments. We previously said, do you have a whistleblower line? Is it an independent whistleblower line? Who does it report to? It's vague, and you're trying to catch the 1 out of 100 companies that are fraudulent, right? They're going to lie to you anyway. Now we're going to have a much better checklist. So this is where we're taking it, and how we now talk about the PRI, the Principles of Responsible Investment. All the global responsible investors are signing up to this, and this global ESG greenwashing that's going on, where everybody says they're responsible. Let's see if everybody can act responsible in the common interest, because this is not really. Let's be really blunt. We can run an investment process that uses non-financial information to assess risk and return so we can make better investment decisions. That's the core of it. But actually, a lot of it is also just about protecting society and protecting companies from themselves. So if we can get investors in an area where it's really non-competitive, that is whistleblower protections, to work together, we can really accomplish a lot. We control, and I use the word control carefully because it's a power play, but it's not. As responsible investors, we control the money, and the money feeds the businesses and gives them cost of capital and access to capital. And we have a duty as responsible investors to allocate that capital appropriately. This is all part of that. So I have more, but I'll stop there.
Andrew, maybe I can just add one point on this, and then it's been raised, and I see briefly in the chat, and around the importance, we've talked about I've talked about efficient markets and everything else. There's one other important factor that has been raised in the chat I think I'd like to speak to, and that's around anti-money laundering and the role that whistleblowers can play in that specific regard. And to add to the list, what we've researched is that in dealing with a whole lot of anti-money laundering and how the financial system itself needs to work better to prevent those money being used in ways that facilitate corruption, etc. Part and parcel of that is, of course, whistleblowing, and of course, the International Corporate Governance Network, ICGN, has also released a paper which is specific to anti-money laundering, but puts whistleblowing as a key tenet within that specific outcome. So, yes, we are broadening the scope a little bit, but given that we are, as Andrew said, managing other people's money and owe them a fiduciary duty, anti-money laundering is in a crucial part of ensuring that we have the right people's money in our care. So thank you. Just wanted to add that point.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks a lot. And we can talk about all of this more in the Q&A session. Ben, we've been working together on this report. These are the three organizations for quite some time now, and we were quite excited. It felt like some sort of extremely serendipitous event when we saw earlier this year that Whistleblower House had been launched. And I think that two of the things that we need to keep in mind are, first of all, that in the context of everything we're speaking about today, it is utterly astonishing that anyone in this country would blow the whistle, given the dangers posed to them if they do it. But also, as you have said to us, that the future of our democracy may rest on the silence or otherwise of those who have information now that should be in the public domain, and who might want to share that but are too scared to do so because of the potential consequences. So I'm going to ask you, and I know I can see you've got a brief presentation. We'll just ask you to speak for no longer than 10 minutes about Whistleblower House, where it comes from, why you set it up, what your intentions are, and maybe most crucially, let's not beat around the bush here. What do you need? Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Let's start off where you just stopped now. Without whistleblowers, the Zondo Commission would not have existed at all. That started off with whistleblowers going to the public protector investigation, and that escalated to where we are today, where the recommendations coming out of the Zondo Commission is absolutely groundbreaking. You've stolen a lot of my thunder, so you've spoken about this slide. It's as if I sent the thing to you yesterday, so you just took all my thunder out. So
Ben, please tell us again. I don't think we can hear these messages often enough.
I get chills when I put the slide up as a slide number one. People lose their lives in South Africa purely because they are willing to defend our democracy, to share information, etc. And we should not forget that. People lose their jobs, people lose their income, their livelihood, purely because Cynthia, as an example, have been jobless for the last 3 or 4 years, purely because she did the right thing. The victimization, you started talking about just the type of things that happen. Let me just capture a few. Disciplinary charges, demotion, dismissal, people get hit by cars on the road, transfer against the will. They make it uncomfortable, untenable for you to work, and then you resign by yourself. I quoted these 2 quotes right at the beginning. The prison system offers no inducement. It's strange to find a whistleblower. I just want to mention, in many instances, whistleblowers actually become accidental whistleblowers because they don't want to become whistleblowers. They don't want to go public, but purely because something is wrong within this organization. If I don't do something, 52 billion rand will flow this way. If I don't do this, state capture will take place. I'm using new words now. Will take place within the organization. And you can look at the state-owned entities, Transnet, Eskom, Denel is on its knees. It's fighting for survival. SAA is gone. As a matter of urgency, effective protection from retaliation must be put in place. These are very powerful things that came out of the Zondo Commission, and I'll come back to that just now. It does not provide a clear-cut procedure for the whistleblower, and Andrew highlighted, is when you want to become a whistleblower, you are lost. You don't know who to speak to. Many legal firms don't even know how to deal with these things. It is not proactive in providing physical protection. People expose themselves, they expose their livelihood, etc., when they become forward. That is the reason why the Whistleblower House was established. We've got 3 whistleblowers on our board. They guide us on a day-to-day basis. When I become just a bit blunt, because you deal with these things 8 to 10 hours a day, they remind me, you're doing it for the livelihood of these people that have put everything on the line. So our vision is to minimize adverse impacts on whistleblower. So what we do, you've illustrated these things right up front. The whistleblowers on our board have indicated these are the critical areas. And when I read through the report that you guys just released, it's as if we had insights into that report and the investigation that you did, and we came up with these solutions. And I promise you, we did not. Financial, and I'll go through a little bit detail a little bit further. Financial, people lose their income, they lose their job, they can't find a job. They actually commit suicide because they can't take care of their family. Legal, Andrew said, even before you start the whistleblower process, you need to have legal advice. And not anyone, any legal advice, specific legal advice on how to do the Protected Disclosure Act, as limited as it is. People, when they lose their jobs, people can't eat, they can't work, they don't have work, so they have nothing. And their health, their mental health, they suffer. So when we talk about medical, we also include psychological, physical, all those kind of things. Risk management is about how do you manage the environment around the whistleblower, and then safety and security. That's what we aim for. That's what we want to do. So far, we've been able to, and I'll get to the detail now, so far we've been able to do some of those things. But money is required for us to be able to do these things. We want to source and contract service providers. We want to connect whistleblowers with specific support service providers and create a network for whistleblowers to connect and share their stories. Now, the last one is a bit dicey, because what we want to do is to establish, and there are networks out there. There are networks where people, we have WhatsApp groups, they talk to each other, they support each other, etc. The danger is that once you're in a WhatsApp group, that WhatsApp group is vulnerable for outside people as well. And therefore, there's where we are with setting up the organization and what we've been doing, we contacted 18 legal firms, attorney firms, and 9 have come on board. We are still talking to the others because there's a lot of detail that we need to go through. It's not a question of making a phone call and the people are on board, because there are contracts that we need to sign. There's SLA, for the want of a better word, because they must understand that it's not a once-off consultation and say, okay, there, off you go. It's a journey, because once you've entered a partnership between a whistleblower and the attorney, there's a journey. In some instances, very recently, I've been told that some of the whistleblowers' cases is up to 9 million rand because it's been going on for 4 years. Which whistleblower in today's life can afford that? You tell me. We have partnered with the Psychological Society of South Africa for National Footprint, which has a national footprint, because all the psychologists of Africa belong to them. So what we've done is we've partnered with them. They've created an email address for us. So when somebody in Springbok, Cape Town, doesn't matter where you are, contact us. We put you in contact with them. That relationship becomes that way. So we are out of that relationship, and we get feedback only as things go along, or they need help in different ways. We do not have information on, and by the way, that's the same for the attorney privilege. We don't get involved in that relationship. Once that link is done there, we step away until they reach out to us again for more or other help. We are finalizing the relationship with SAMA, South African Medical Association, who deals with GPs. Back to the health situation. People can't eat properly because they don't have money. They suffer from stress. When you're stressed, you actually clench your teeth at night, and you have dental issues. You need a dentist to go there. I don't think I'm understating this when I say the health sector, the public health sector in South Africa is in a shambles. So therefore, we'd like to ensure that the best services are provided to these people. We are finalizing a relationship very similar to SAMA with the Society of Psychiatrists. So the two that we have on board, rock, stock, and barrel right now, we've got 9 legal firms, And these are reputable firms. These are not small firms. We are going through and we'll put more, and we need more people to come on board to share the load. And then the Psychological Society, we've got on board solid. Risk and Security Advisory team that we have on board is that when a whistleblower contacts us and they think their lives are exposed, somebody's following them, suddenly never in their lives have somebody accosted them at a robot, and things happen, we do things to assess that as well. Very important is we do a risk assessment on people. So there's a risk assessment tool. So there are two ways that we need to do this. First of all, we as Whistleblower House need to ensure that somebody who approaches us is in fact a whistleblower. They're not doing it for ulterior motives. It is not somebody who wants to get inside information, so you do a background check on them. But also we've got to do a check on the security of the whistleblower to make sure that as they move along, they are safe, etc. I'll come to the needs now. Funders have been identified and engaged. We opened our doors on 22nd of February, and the amount that we've been able to raise to date, as I'm sitting here now, is around 18,000 Rand. We've contacted the banks, no feedback. We've contacted service providers, no feedback. Let me give you some idea of how many people contacted us, and I see some of them are on the chat here. Once we've launched on the 22nd of February, 74 people reached out to us as of yesterday. Once you contact us, we send a form to you to say, we need some information so that we can help you. Name, address, a couple of other things, and then you tell us what you need from us. 48 people responded, which means we now have 48 clients. Now, please bear in mind that the numbers below here does not link up, because some people will need legal and physical and medical. They will need financial and something else. So the numbers are not adding up to 48. Requests for legal assistance are 31. 18 have been helped. They are now being taken through the process, and they're walking the journey with the attorney. Requests for counseling, we have 14. 13 have been made contact, and they are on the journey as well. Requests for financial assistance, 5, we could help 2. Requests for security assistance, 10 people approached us, we could help 3. And the last 2 is purely because it is hard cash that's required. All the others are pro bono facilities, and we absolutely appreciate that relationship that we could build up with these people. But hard cash is needed to help whistleblowers. What do we need? Money. First of all, money. In your report, you talk about a fund that needs to be established. We would love to be able to be the people that manage that fund. We need more partners to spread the load. And the examples are legal, medical, etc. Retailers. What we've done is we took a step back and said, how do we help a whistleblower? No income, they're suffering financially. But it's so bad that the children get kicked out of school because they can't pay the funds. So what we've done is we've thought laterally and say, if we contact the retailers, and let's name a few, Checkers, Pick n Pay, Massmart, they've got the facility where you've got loyalty cards, you get points, etc. And we've approached a few of them and said, why don't you give us a loyalty card principal and give us an account? And let's use Massmart because they're slightly bigger. So then we could actually tell, and nowadays with delivery taking place, they don't have to go to Massmart, to Macro, etc. So we can actually, whistleblower approach us and say, I need food. These are the basic food that we need. We can then have it delivered to the house. So what we try doing is just think laterally that as opposed to parting with money, we actually help you turn over goods, and we're actually helping people on this side. And I'll come to the numbers just now. Medical aids. The pro bono process will take us to a particular point. If the medical aid can come forward and say, similar to the loyalty cards, we provide you with a medical aid account. So you could either go to a GP, you could go to a dentist, you could go to a psychologist, and you draw down from this account as the things go along. And we'll put process in place to make sure that is not abused. Financial institutions. We approach the banks, and what we ask them to do is just make contact with us and let's talk about how we can help people. So when you lose your job, for 6 months you can survive because there's a little bit of kitty if you're lucky. You got to pay out because you settled, and you've and that's a different topic that we talk about. Is you settle a separation agreement, and typically that's somewhere between 6 and 12 months. 6 months, that money is gone. You can't find a job. You are now destitute. So if we can reach out to a bank and say, there's a car that needs to be repaid, there's a bond that needs to be repaid. How can you help us with payment holidays, interest adjustments, or even writing off the debt? So those are the kind of things that we're talking about. Let me talk a bit about the CEO role. Whistleblower get hounded out of organizations. Can you imagine if the CEO of an organization, and all CEOs embrace the whistleblower? What they do is, if they embrace the whistleblower, they celebrate and they reward and they absolutely carry them. The culture in the organization changes like that. Purely because if the CEO is willing to support a whistleblower, who am I now to go victimize? If somebody gets disciplined internally and the CEO says, stop, the culture in the organization changes, and therefore it just changes everything. And that's one of the things that we want to do. We have made an appointment. We are waiting for an appointment with BUSA, Business Unit South Africa, so we can actually bring these things to the fore. So that's kind of, and I'm wrapping up. The way forward, this is the slide that we put on, because we need funding, international and local, because we want to carry these whistleblowers. We want to protect them, and we want to walk with them on the journey. And some of these whistleblowers that we've helped are on the chat group. I saw the comments coming through. We want to partner with civil society organizations to, in fact, start pressurizing, to change the environment, to work together, etc. So we need money, we need partnerships, and it doesn't have to be financial. I've given you the indication of how the retailers can help us, etc. But ultimately, we need to change the culture inside the organizations where the CEOs, and once they do that, everything around the whistleblower will change very quickly. It's not going to be overnight, but believe me, it will change very quickly. That's all I have to say. All I can say is it's been a hell of a journey since the 22nd of February, and an eye-opener for all of us in the Whistleblower House. We never expected this amount of approaches and this amount of need out there. Anybody who hears me must understand the whistleblowers stand between us and anarchy in South Africa. And we need to protect them, we need to carry them, and we need to walk with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'm very pleased that the report aligns with what you're doing, because I think what it demonstrates is that the problems are clear and the solutions are also clear. And I think what you've set out there is an incredibly, it just shows how much, not just how much need there is, but also how that need can be broken down into manageable chunks, right? By all sorts of different sectors and organizations and people in our society. I think the teeth grinding example and the need for dentists is just illustrative of the extraordinary layers of pressure that whistleblowers are under. I think it's a really important way for us to think quite how widespread this is. Yes. Go ahead.
Let me give you some idea of the costs. I spoke a little bit about one case that's up to 9 million rand right now. People have to go to CCMA, and if they fail there, because what happens is the organization has the power of money. They go to the CCMA, they've got to go to labor court. Over 5 years, they get stretched out and they get bankrupted. They've got to go to, and examples would be labor court, magistrates, the high court, and that's the route they need to take. And there are people today fighting from 2003. Those are the whistleblowers coming through today, 2003, 2007, still battling. They have no money. They are totally destitute. Now, let me give you some idea about the cost and how quickly these things ramp up. You spoke about in the report about the fund. If we've estimated that to live a decent life, you need 15,000 rand, not the 3,500 currently being. That is absolutely desperation, and that's a sight. We suggested that 15,000 would at least tide the whistleblower over. If you do that over 6 months for 10 people, that's 900,000 rand. If you do it for 100, it's 9 million. Right there, you need a huge kitty. And this is just financial help to tide the person over for 6 months. Now, that doesn't include the legal, because that is billions, millions. To treating for psychological, it's 50,000 rand because it's a series of treatment that you need to get. It ramps up very quickly. Just to give, I thought I'll just share some thoughts so that you can get a sense of the money involved.
The actual money involved. Okay, thank you so much.
You.
Thanks all you. So we're 5 minutes into our Q&A session. So let's head to that. And as I said, obviously we will continue for a little while after 12 o'clock. But in order to deal with the most popular question, the most upvoted question is from Bianca Goodson. Hi, thank you for doing this. It means a lot, but more is needed. Will you guys attempt to influence your peers to join your position? I'm gonna, Andrew, Rob, you guys decide who wants. Andrew, you want to go with that?
Let me take. I've been thinking about it, so let me take a shot. Yes. There's that's what I started to talk about. What can we do? What's our leverage points? It's how we engage with auditors. Investors must do that together. How we ensure that the chair of the audit committee, which is a key reporting line in any, whether it's internal audit or whistleblowers, it's a key position, must be an independent person. Now, investors can demand that. We can work together collaboratively to protect all of our investors and society and do that together. We can work with so now a small rabbit hole, I'll do it really quickly. I mean, I love the US model where whistleblowers not only kept anonymous, they can get huge rewards. So there's people who have blown the whistle, it's turned into big fines, they got huge millions of dollars of payouts, and they're still employed by the same company because nobody knows they blew the whistle. How fantastic is that? A whole legal fraternity sprung around that. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said we must do this in South Africa. This is the answer, certainly from a financial investor's point of view. But the SEC can levy fines, and they have broad authority to do so in millions of dollars. Whereas while the FISCA and JSE can levy fines, I think it's in a very narrow scope. And I say I think because we haven't actually investigated it. So we'll be having conversations. We've got one scheduled with the JSE shortly to start getting the ball rolling. They're very open to this discussion, by the way. And FISCA must be involved in this because they can also levy fines and penalties. There may be a way to create a whistleblower pool. That's way down the road. It's like changing any government regulation or anything else, but that is a potentiality. So yes, we will be reaching out to our colleagues, investors through the PRI. That's the Principles of Responsible Investment Group for the United Nations. Through a CISA, I would think we'll be talking to them, and as well as our regulators. Rob, did you want to add to that?
I think you covered it, Andrew. Actually,
just to add that.
Brilliant. Just to add the seriousness in which we take the topic. I mean, it's not just we don't want to pay it simple lip service. We want this to be the beginning of a long journey of deep, active engagement and stewardship with the market as a whole, as what we call like the beta strategy, really focus in the market on the importance of this particular area, how crucial it is. I mean, and let's face it, it's not going to only be about governance and corruption and everything else. We are going to see real instances of fraud within in the social and even environmental framework. I mean, I don't even need to tell Tracy about that, but how important it is for those who are working in companies who are witnessing environmental crime, social crime on other levels beyond just corruption. This is something that is so crucial that's going to play a much bigger role, I believe, in strengthening the market, given the broad-based nature of our thinking on ESG. That's a point. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
You mustn't overlook the alignment of interest here. I mean, do you think Rob and his team want to stand up in front of a group of pension fund trustees and tell them the share went down 95% because they missed the fraud? Or I want to stand up in front of a unit trust investor and explain I'm holding the bond of a company that's proven to destroy the environment? I mean, there's no chance. There's absolute alignment of interest here. This is what we get paid to do. This is what we stand up and say. We are responsible investors. Well, let's just goddamn well be responsible.
Thanks, Andrew. I think there's a question here from Chris Gilmore, which I think touches on some of the counter arguments to what we've been saying. He says, wouldn't guaranteeing anonymity for whistleblowers be at least a step in the right direction, to which I think we all agree it would be. But then he says, of course, this opens up the possibility of vexatious whistleblowing. Do we think that that's a risk? Should we even be thinking about that? Do we care? Yes, Andrew, you go.
Chris, you know I love you, so don't take my tone of voice personally. I hate this argument. I think it's a crap argument. I think it's the same argument this has because 1 in 1,000 women makes up an abuse story to get back at an ex, then we should dismiss the other 999 women as liars. It's crap. That's why we have investigative powers, investigative authorities. If it's a vexatious claim, it will quickly get weeded out and go nowhere. Fine. It's the cost of doing business. We're trying to catch the 3 in 100 companies that are truly being fraudulent or malfeasant. We need to get all the information we can get to do that job. And if there's some vexatious stuff that comes through, it'll get weeded out through the legal judicial process. Ben?
Let me just put it softly. There is a danger. That doesn't mean we must throw the baby out with the bathwater. We should put steps in place to make sure that doesn't get abused, but we should move.
Agreed. Okay, thanks. I'm going to read a question here from Peter Becker. It says, when it comes to negligence with regards to safety precautions, where is the bar for protected whistleblowing? Must there be imminent danger to life or health? Or is the lack of a safety precautional mechanism and the resulting potential danger sufficient? Ben, do you want to answer that one or comment on that?
Let me talk at the principal level. We don't have money at the moment. We are trying to assist and trying to get things on board. Preventative measures are always much more, it's much better than after the fact. I mean, it doesn't help us taking care of a body. So when somebody comes to us and say, there are cars parked in the house. I mean, I've been living here for 10 years. There's suddenly strange cars on. That's what we want to check out rather than go and take care of the body afterwards.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, excuse me, just give me a second. A question from Lauren Fullerton. What governance processes do you implement to ensure that the funds you receive, I presume that's in reference to your managed funds, are accounted for in a transparent and responsible manner? Andrew, I know you want to take this one.
No.
Oh, sorry.
I'll let Rob go first this time, actually, if you want.
Hang on, sorry. I must say that might actually be a question for Ben. Lauren, if you're still here, perhaps you could just clarify that.
Let's for now assume it's us. The board chairman is Ivan Pillay. He's been hounded out of SARS. A board member is Liesel Groenewald, who's sitting as a senior manager in Ethics Institute. We have auditors, and we can talk a lot about the auditors during the State Capture Commission, but we have decent auditors on board, willing to help us, and we've got decent systems that we're putting in place to make sure that every cent is accounted for. And we've got separation, absolute separation between the operational budget, which we don't have yet. We are actually, myself and Cynthia Stimple, has been working since January at total risk to ourselves, purely because we are passionate about this. So it is about making sure that the operational cost is managed separately, and then the way we will deal with the grants and everything else, there will be strict paperwork. We do checks on the whistleblower, so we understand that the person we are helping is a whistleblower. It's not my brother that will get 100,000 rand as if he's going to be out, because there's a file that I create for the whistleblower, and any month that we allocate monies that we allocate to that whistleblower will be allocated to that account, and then we move forward. But a very, very valid question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. And and I'm sure that anyone who is interested in funding the organization will need to and would always demand proof of those governance procedures before donating. We've got a question here from Louise Jones, who I know is an expert in this, not whistleblowing specifically, but corporate support for social justice advocacy. She says, funding advocacy is a long-term journey and business is generally unwilling to stay the course if they can't see a return on investment in the short term. How can we shift other corporate attitudes on funding this kind of advocacy work? Andrew, do you want to take that one?
I don't think you can. I've worked for nonprofits. I hate working for nonprofits. I want to create things that are sustainable in their own rights, with levies and a revenue stream that you don't question and you don't have to go begging for every year. That's my view. And if that's a fee, an industry fee, we all pay dues to ACISA, for example, as the asset management industry. The JSE collects fees on every trade, for example. I mean, every industry has its fees and levies. It's a levy. Sorry, that's a short answer to a complex question. But I begging for money, a begging bowl is not the solution here.
Yeah. Gotcha. Lots of thumbs up there. I didn't know we could do thumbs up here, but apparently we can. Okay, a question from Ian Midup. After following the PDA process to the letter of the law for a disclosure and a subsequent disclosure and getting no appropriate reply, just getting shrugged off, what do I do next while staying within the law? So I think this is kind of illustrative of the problem we're talking about, right? Even if you try to follow the letter of the law, it doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. It's hard, I think, Ian, for anyone to really answer that question without knowing, more information about where you are and what you do. But I'm sure, Ben, that's a sort of example of someone who could get in touch with you, even if it was just to ask for guidance on next steps. Is that accurate?
The difficulty we have in South Africa is that the law enforcement agent has been hollowed out. The MPA is very vocal about saying we have a lack of capacity, and we're very worried about what's going to happen to the State Capture Commission results because the MPA is battling. So at the moment, I just want to put it out there. We are very hesitant to deal directly with law enforcement agencies because they've been hollowed out. There's been people put inside there, and there's a sieve of information leaking out. So we are very hesitant to contact them. So what happens is a civil route is normally followed. Simple answer.
Okay, thanks.
Ben, I want to say I love what you've done on a shoestring, and particularly I love that you've got those 9 law firms who you didn't name for some reason on a pro bono basis to give advice to whistleblowers. That's probably the answer to the question. What is in the law for a whistleblower? We had a debate with Ethel on screen a few months ago now about, hey, is it okay if you think there's malfeasance going on to actually steal that information from the company to hand it over to an appropriate regulator? My answer is sure, why not? I read the PDA, it looks like you can do that, but it was very unclear whether you can actually do that. Is that not theft of corporate confidential information? Well, not if you're blowing the whistle under the PDA, I don't think. But the point is, this is the kind of advice a whistleblower needs. What are the bounds of the law? I suppose if you took that and ran off and put it in the newspaper or online, that's breaching the law, but I'm not an expert. That's why what you've done with access to pro bono legal advice is so important.
Thanks, Andrew. Sorry, Ben, did you want to respond to that?
No.
Okay. I mean, I think someone raised the question, I think it was in the comments rather than the chat, of law firms and conflicts of interest. And I think this is a huge problem for social justice, pro bono legal work generally, because all the big entities, whether they are state-owned or private sector, employ all the big law firms, right? We've encountered this in our own work. It's very hard to find someone to represent you against a big, powerful entity because most of them are conflicted. Ben, you wanted to say something about that?
That's one of the reasons why we need a large panel. So when I knock on law firm 1, the first thing they do is, and on the form that you apply for, we ask just one question: who is the company involved? What is the company involved? So when I contact law firm 1, I say it is Transnet. Sorry, we're in conflict. Then I go number 2, number 3, number 4. And the more we have on our panel, the less the chance becomes that the person can't be helped. So we do want a large panel so that we can actually help everybody. Right at the beginning, you indicated that it's very easy to think that it's only in the civil service, in the government environment where corruption is. It's pervasive. We were surprised at how wide the whistleblower, the backgrounds from the whistleblower division, pleasantly surprised, because it's not only from government, it is across industries, across South Africa geographical areas, small organizations and big. The abuse is rife in South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. We've got a question here from Olga Konstantinos. What about the work that, for example, outer and investigative journalists do? How can or should it be leveraged to help whistleblowers? I mean, I think Andrew indicated earlier that without them, we whistleblowers would be in dire straits indeed, and they've probably arguably done more, the press, than anyone else in this country to protect whistleblowers. Have you got any response to that, plans to engage with some of these NGOs or investigative journalism outfits?
I'm proud to say I'm an ex-COO of Outer. So my relationship with Wayne, Stefani, and them are solid. But that's only one organization. It has been a hectic 2-3 months that we've been so far. I sent out a letter to all these the NGOs to say we need to get together, but I would like to have one-on-ones with them. I've got to make time to create that networks again to help the whistleblower. But it has been crazy. When I say we work 8 to 10 hours a day between myself and Cynthia, I am not exaggerating. People call us, and I spend 20 minutes understanding what the people need even before they fill in the form. So it is crazy. I had hair before I started.
And absolutely, and I'm sure that our involvement hasn't made your lives any easier, but hopefully it's all for the for the good in the long run.
This is what we need to do. Thank you.
Andrew,
just to say, Olga works for Futuregrowth, so we're colleagues. But what she's highlighting and what Ben's echoing, there's a broad church of interested parties with common alignment of interests. As I say, it's such a broad area; it covers such a sweep of society. In fact, all of society. Everybody on this call is part of that constituency. So yeah, we all must find our ways in our realms to play a positive role, whether it's contributions or regulations or politics.
Yeah, and just again to go back to all of those tiny little components of what Ben is trying to put together. There's so much that there's something that everybody can do really, no matter how small. On top of, I'm not suggesting you don't need a big whack of cash, right? Because clearly that's the primary need. A question from Mike Gardner. Nobody's ever been prosecuted for failure to report criminality. Is there a way to compel, in terms of Section 34 of PRECA, I'm sorry, my ignorance, I don't know what act that is. Is there a way to compel SAPs and the NPA to action these relatively simple legal matters, which would surely be a step change in preventing corruption? Ben, you're laughing uproariously there.
Brilliant.
I should put my camera off the moment you start talking about the law enforcement agencies. Our experience is it's extremely dangerous. They don't have capacity. SAPs have been hollowed out completely. The hawks are now only starting to find their feet going forward. And no matter what happens from a ground route when you do the investigation, ultimately it lands up into it pinnacles in two areas. Either the MPA for criminal or SIU potentially for civil. That's it.
So yeah, look, there are rules under, certainly for us. We have a compliance officer as a split reporting line to FISCA, not just to us, although we hire and we pay salary and bonus, but he has a reporting line to FISCA. So there's a very clear reporting requirement in our realm. And I would guess that's one of the reasons we focused on IRBA and SICA and how they deal with these things, because there's chartered accountants all over every company, and do they have reporting requirements themselves? And it's quite vague. The auditing, this is interesting. All that criticism I have of SICA and IRBA before about the complete absence of mention of supporting whistleblowers or using the information or protecting anonymity. The one thing that is there, they do have an obligation to report what they call reportable irregularities. I'm assuming that's to a regulatory authority, so that's positive. But then what are the consequences? Even those organizations seem completely incapable of weeding out their own members who are known to be corrupt. So it's kind of weak, and I have to echo Ben's sentiments.
I've difficulty talking about the detail, but let me share with you. You have the auditors got a bad name through the State Capture Commission process.
Oh,
we have auditors coming to us. No, rightfully so. I'm saying they were exposed for the wrongdoing because they were chasing the money and not doing the work properly. We have auditors that came to us and said, I got fired because I exposed within company X, and my company then fired me because I was doing the right thing there. There's a whole lot of work that we do in South Africa, but we're focusing on whistleblowers.
Thanks. I see we still have most of our audience online, which is really fantastic. Thank you all for staying a bit longer. We're going to please, if you've got any other questions, quickly put them in the chat. I'm sure everyone is wanting to wrap up relatively soon, but I think we've answered all the specific questions and the broader themes of questions. There is one here, Andrew, about what engagement have you had with SICA? And I think you did touch on that earlier, and obviously we've now just mentioned it. But do you, given your previous comments, do you think there's potential there?
We have about 6 or maybe 8 CAs on staff who are reading those policy documents, I would tell you, and they will be attending the AGM. I think, Olga, you're online. I think it's next week. we're gearing up. Again, starting with your research, Tracy, we are looking at everything, our own whistleblower alignment policy, our querying of counterparties, how we engage with our industry compatriots, how we engage with the likes of SICA. We're doing that now. It's a learning journey, but we are rolling.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up, but I'm going to give Ben, if you would like to just spend 1 minute, let's end let's end with you, because I think that the work you're doing is extraordinary. And I think that it's important to emphasize that all of us see this as the first step. In my organization, we ban the term, this is a journey, but in some instances, things are a journey. So I think this is a really exciting first step, lots of potential for involvement from all sorts of sectors and areas. I'll give you the last word. And just before I do that, thanks so much to everyone for joining this morning, for your interaction and for your interest in this topic. And thanks to Rob and Andrew and your organizations for the support that you've given to this project and your dedication to this issue. Go for it, Ben.
Thank you, Tracy.
The Whistleblower House have been established with one vision. Very simple. To support the whistleblower on their journey as they go through there and try to lessen the effect on their lives. Very simple.
Thank you.
We need help to do that.
We do. They need lots of help. Lots and lots and lots of help. And we'll be speaking about this more. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic day. And please feel free to get in touch with any of us here, any of the organizations or people that have been on this call for more information, more discussions. Okay, I said I'd give you the last word. I'm saying goodbye now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Rob.
Goodbye.